Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to have secured today's adjournment debate on an issue that affects communities across the country, the condition of our roads. Madam Deputy Speaker, while I will focus in this debate on the situation in Cheshire and my constituency of Chester South and Eddisbury, and what I believe is a failure by local authorities to get to grips with the issue, I want to begin by setting the context and reflecting on the broader systemic problems in how we repair and maintain our road network. The Public Accounts Committee recently published a report on the condition and maintenance of local roads in England. It showed that this problem is widespread, that the Department for Transport does not have a good grasp of the condition that local roads in England are really in, and that funding arrangements to local authorities are likely to be pushing them to focus spending on short-term reactive work. Madam Deputy Speaker, in my view, it is this reactive rather than proactive approach to road maintenance in Cheshire that urgently needs to change. Instead of identifying and tackling neglected routes, particularly in rural areas, we see a pattern of piecemeal patch-ups on individual potholes rather than long-term, cost-effective repairs that offer real value for money. I will give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, could I commend the Honourable Lady for Chester South and Eddisbury for bringing this forward. I spoke to her beforehand. I'm minded of the old rhyme that my mother used to say to me, "A stitch in time saves nine." With that in mind, and what the Honourable Lady has said, does the Honourable Lady not agree that a pothole repair in time can save accidents, save lives, and government must be more proactive in ensuring that we deal with the small issues and save money before they become costly, large issues?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. That is exactly the point that I'm making, and he says it very well. And as I outline this issue in more detail, I would urge the Minister to consider how local authorities might be encouraged to take a more strategic, preventative approach. I have lost count of the number of times frustrated residents have asked me why a white circle of paint has been drawn around one pothole, while another, quite literally, right next to it, is left untouched because it doesn't meet the criteria for repair. And yet we all know that within a week or two, a team will have to return to fix the one that was missed. I will give way.
Can I thank the Honourable Member and my constituency neighbour for giving way on that point? She talks about residents, and would she agree with me that it is actually our residents who often know their areas best because they live and breathe them every day, like the residents on East Avenue in Weston who I've consulted widely over road repairs and traffic calming measures, or the residents of Stewart Street in Crewe, a key arterial road that's been neglected for some time. Would she agree that our residents really should be listened to as part of any plans to repair our roads?
The Honourable Member makes an important point, and this is about voicing the views of residents, and they do know their area best. And what we have seen, and residents have seen, is that this short-term mindset has consequences. The condition of our roads is worsening, and the national repair backlog has grown from estimates of between 7.6 and 11.7 billion in 2019 to over 15 billion today. That backlog in road repairs has rightly been called a national embarrassment. It's a sign that the system we have in place is simply not working. My honourable friend, the member for Reigate, during her time on the Public Accounts Committee, rightly made the case for a more strategic approach to road repair and maintenance, alongside greater funding certainty and a simplified allocation process. I echo those calls today, both to the Minister and to Cheshire West and Chester Council and Cheshire East Council. This is not a partisan point. I know that there are members across the House who share frustrations with how local authorities manage road repairs. My intention is to offer a constructive perspective on how we might improve things in my constituency and across the country. Madam Deputy Speaker, Cheshire is the best county to drive through. We have outstanding countryside, beautiful villages and scenic routes. But what should be a pleasure is too often spoiled by potholes. In my constituency, where public transport is minimal and key amenities like a GP or post office are often too far to reach without a car, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's a real barrier to daily life. Businesses depend on these roads, and crumbling surfaces damage vehicles, endanger road users, and hold back our local economy. I will give way.
Many thanks to the Honourable Lady, who is being very collegiate, as she always is. Would she agree with me that it is incredibly important in our beautiful Cheshire towns that our roads are maintained in good condition? I'm thinking particularly there's a stretch of Alsager, which is absolutely lovely and has a fantastic local cafe on it. It's a major part of the town centre, though, and the degeneration of the road is making it look less attractive than it otherwise could. Does she agree with me that these are important points? You know, not simply for the state of the road themselves, but actually the whole of the local economy.
I thank the Honourable Member for that intervention, and the point is an important one, that this is having an impact on that road, but also on a village and on businesses and people who are trying to use that area. And that's why we need a better system, one that delivers better roads, a better value for the taxpayer, and why we must not settle for the status quo, piecemeal approach that councils like Cheshire West and Chester and Cheshire East currently seem to take. Like many honourable and right honourable members, potholes are one of the top issues in my inbox. Yet, as members of Parliament, we don't have direct control over local roads. Highways are a devolved responsibility. So when constituents raise concerns, I encourage them to report issues to the council, and I work with them to follow up with officials and draw attention to where repairs are urgently needed. But people are rightly frustrated, and, as we've heard, local voices need to be heard. That's why I've secured today's adjournment debate, to do what I can in Parliament to raise this issue, highlight its severity in Cheshire, and push for a better approach to tackling both our counties and the UK's growing road crisis. I will give way.
Thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Like residents in Cheshire, in Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme, I hear very often about the problems of potholes, but the government has committed recently to £6.7 million for South Yorkshire, £8.9 million for North Lincolnshire, and that's a huge step forward, but it's the strategic leadership at a local level from Mayor Ros Jones that's seen a significant amount more than that put towards pothole repairs. 144 streets have been resurfaced, and we're at the lowest level of streets needing to be looked at ever actually in that area. Would she therefore agree with me that that strategic leadership at a local level is absolutely vital, but also that we not only have to focus on potholes in roads, but also what our pavements are looking like as well, particularly for those people who have access issues?
I thank the Honourable Member for his point, and yes, I will be getting on to the fact that it's not just an issue of funding. There are serious issues about how that strategic approach is taken. As I was saying, this is a crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I know whether from knocking on doors or through people contacting my office, I have dealt with hundreds of road maintenance related cases, from potholes to overgrown hedges, poor road signage and other related highway issues. But to really understand the impact for people locally, I want to take just a few moments to share some personal stories of those affected by the poor state of the roads in Chester South and Eddisbury. David Doyle runs a taxi company just outside Tarpley, and he came to see me at one of my mobile advice surgeries to share his growing concern about the state of our roads. As someone who drives across Cheshire all day, every day for a living, he sees the problem daily. We all know how frustrating and at times dangerous it is to dodge potholes, or that moment when we wince as we hit one and feel the jolt through the car. But for David, this isn't just about inconvenience or even the rising cost of repairs for new tyres or suspension. It's about lost income. If his car is damaged, he can't work. He may even have to cancel bookings or leave passengers stranded. This is someone's livelihood, and it's being put at risk by the failure to maintain our roads properly. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not just motorists who are affected by poor road conditions. Paul Kerr, a keen cyclist, came to see me recently at a surgery in Huxley. He cycles over 1,000 kilometres a month across the UK, and he told me that the worst roads he's ridden are in Cheshire. Potholes are inconvenient and sometimes dangerous for drivers, but for cyclists they pose a serious safety risk. The issue is often made worse because repairs tend to be done with motorists in mind. Potholes near the edge of the carriageway may be ignored or dismissed as too shallow to bother with. Yet for cyclists, who are more exposed and ride closer to the verge. Even a small defect can be hazardous. And of course, when drivers instinctively swerve to avoid a damaged section of road, they can unintentionally put cyclists at greater risk. We must do more to recognise cyclists' right to safe, well-maintained roads, especially in Cheshire, where cycling is not only good for our health and the environment, but one of the best ways to enjoy our beautiful countryside. Madam Deputy Speaker, the two examples above come from constituents living in the Cheshire West and Chester part of my constituency, but the roads are no better in Cheshire East. I recently went with Councillor Janet Clowes, our excellent councillor for Wimbury Ward, to see the state of the Newcastle Road leading up to the roundabout serving the Wychwood Village and Wychwood Park estates. Councillor Clowes described the inaction of Cheshire East Council to fix the deteriorating road surface and intermittent potholes where the speed limit on Newcastle Road is 60 miles per hour. Traffic weaving in and out of this pothole slalom on the approach to the roundabout has led to multiple accidents. Despite repeated requests over 2 years for the road to be top dressed or to at least have sections of level 2 patching to make this section safer, her requests have been denied, with funds being channeled to more urban areas elsewhere in Cheshire East. And herein lies another issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. £53 million has been allocated to Cheshire East Highways Department this year, and not a penny is being spent in the ward of Wimbury in my constituency of Chester South and Eddisbury.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will give way.
I completely concur with what not only my honourable friend but neighbour has said about Cheshire West and Cheshire, but the roads in Cheshire East are a disgrace. And as to the money, £53 million that my honourable friend alludes to, I have tried to get to the bottom of where that money has been spent. In fact, I've had to resort to freedom of information requests to find out where Cheshire East is spending that money. Supposedly, they don't know the location or the area or the postcode, merely a job number, which I find hard to understand, because how do they tell the contractors where to go? So, does my honourable friend, does she have the concerns that I do, that this money is not being spent properly, nor is it being spent fairly across the council area?
My honourable friend makes such an important point and really hits the nail on the head. And it's just not acceptable that wards like the large ward in Cheshire East in my constituency, Wimbury, is consistently neglected, with funding being diverted elsewhere, and as my honourable friend points out, where we don't know. Cheshire East Council may forget the rural areas of the borough, as its counterpart in Cheshire West does, but I will not stop speaking up for Wimbury, and nor will Councillor Clowes. Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may briefly share one more example from Cheshire East. Wrenbury cum Frith was temporarily renamed by locals Wrenbury cum Pothole. The main issue in Wrenbury was on Station Road, a 650-foot thoroughfare leading into the heart of the village, and therefore used frequently by residents. Frustration with the state of the roads ran so high that villagers actually amended their own welcome sign and erected another on the road, warning drivers that the condition of this road would, and I quote, break your vehicle and your soul. 650 feet of road, 174 potholes, countless reports to Cheshire East Council and campaigns led by Councillor James Pearson and the Parish Council followed, and only after the issue got national coverage did Cheshire East finally commit to repairing the road. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, in these examples, we can see three clear issues emerging with the current approach to road maintenance in Cheshire. Firstly, whilst both councils seek to follow the National Well-Managed Highway Infrastructure Code of Practice, this has resulted in maintenance strategies that are reactive rather than proactive, leading to wasted council tax and government highway maintenance and pothole allocations. Secondly, there is a failure of the councils to think about the wider impacts that poor roads have on individuals, businesses and communities. And thirdly, there is a failure to fully understand the needs to more effectively prioritise rural roads, often where public transport is not viable or simply non-existent. Across constituencies such as Chester South and Eddisbury, where there is a far greater social, educational and economic dependency on the rural highway network. As I begin to conclude my remarks, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to reflect briefly on the funding allocated to Cheshire West and Chester Council and Cheshire East Council and how it's being used by their respective highways departments. Because frankly, I do not believe a lack of funding justifies the poor performance we've seen. The figures tell their own story. Over the past few years, both councils have significantly increased the number of potholes being filled. In Cheshire West and Chester, the number of potholes being repaired has more than tripled since 2021. That might sound like progress, but I would suggest it points to something else. That repairs aren't being done to a lasting standard, and the patch it up strategy means the wider network is deteriorating at a faster and faster rate. In one case alone, a single pothole on the A51 at Blakenhall Hall had to be repaired 9 times in just 18 months.
Terrible.
In addition, the focus primarily on urban networks has exacerbated a culture of managed decline on rural carriageways, where repairs are too often delayed or overlooked altogether. The specific challenges faced by rural roads are often ignored. The wear and tear caused by heavy vehicles like tractors and HGVs, the lack of alternative transport options, and the need to travel greater distances just to access basic amenities. So I urge the Minister to ensure that all councils are considering not just our urban streets, but the needs of the rural road networks too. What makes this even more frustrating is that Conservative councillors in Cheshire West and Chester have repeatedly put forward reasonable, fully costed proposals to improve the highways network, proposals that would have made a meaningful difference, particularly for rural areas. Over the past 2 years alone, these included more than £3 million in additional investment for core maintenance, gully clearing, pavement safety and public rights of way. And every single one was rejected by the Labour-led council. At the same time, the council has steadily reduced its own funding contribution to highways maintenance, cutting it from £4.5 million under the previous Conservative administration to just £2.05 million in 2023-24. Had they simply maintained earlier spending levels, they could have invested an additional £14 million in the network by now. That's not a funding problem from central government, that's a political choice at a local level, and residents are paying the price for it. This situation is made worse by outdated guidance from the Department for Transport, which lacks clear direction for local authorities on the use of new technologies for assessing road conditions and repairing potholes, as well as on how to adapt to the challenges posed by climate change. And as the condition of our roads has worsened, we've seen large sums paid out in compensation. Cheshire West and Chester paid out over £200,000 last year alone. Cheshire East, meanwhile, has faced more than 2,500 legal claims related to pothole damage since 2021. Yet only a fraction of those claims have been accepted. And astonishingly, tens of thousands of pounds have been spent on legal fees just to review those applications. This is not an efficient use of public money.
Shocking.
All of this points to a system that is reactive, wasteful and deeply frustrating for residents. According to the industry, it costs around £57 to repair a pothole as part of a planned, proactive approach. That's a fraction of the cost of dealing with compensation claims, not to mention the inconvenience for drivers and the damage to vehicles. I'm certain that my constituents would far rather see durable, well-maintained roads than have to battle with the council for months to claim compensation for damage that should never have occurred in the first place. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope I have made clear just how strongly my constituents and I feel about the state of our roads in Cheshire. The answer isn't endless pots of money, but a fundamental change in approach, one that tackles the problem proactively and makes sustainable, long-term value-for-money repairs. People don't want to see their council tax or government grants wasted on crumbling repairs and short-term fixes. Many here today will have had similar experiences, and so with collaborative and constructive intent, my ask to the Minister is that the department recognises that Cheshire's roads are in an unacceptable condition, and I ask for his support in advocating for a better approach to road repairs so that all my constituents, whatever their mode of transport, can have confidence in Cheshire's roads. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Honourable Member for Chester South and Eddisbury for securing this debate regarding the condition of roads in Cheshire and for her admirable efforts to highlight the concerns of her constituents. And thank you also to all honourable members who've contributed to this debate. I appreciate, along with everyone in this chamber, that this country is suffering from a plague of potholes and poor road conditions. These do not only serve as a costly nuisance to drivers, but also a great risk to all road users, including cyclists and motorcyclists, who are more vulnerable. The public are the ones facing the repercussions of our poor roads and the maintenance backlog that has built up everywhere over the last decade. And we are all in complete agreement, I believe, that this has to stop. This government is up to that challenge, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is determined to improve conditions for all road users. We are already putting our money where our mouth is by providing £500 million of extra funding for highway maintenance this year, taking overall spending through the highways maintenance block to nearly £1.6 billion this year. That is the largest ever funding amount for local highway maintenance in England in 1 year, and means a huge increase in funding for nearly every local highways authority in England, including in Cheshire. In the Honourable Member's area of Cheshire East Council will receive up to an additional £5.54 million of highway maintenance funding this year, on top of around £15.5 million baseline funding. And Cheshire West and Chester Council will receive an additional £4 million of highway maintenance funding this year, on top of around £11.4 million baseline funding. The government is determined to transform the condition of the country's highways. The Honourable Member will also note that 25% of this year's funding uplift is contingent on each local highway authority meeting the requirements announced by the Secretary of State in March this year. We're making sure that road users, like the people of Cheshire, have full transparency from local authorities of how this investment will be spent in transforming their roads. And so, all 154 highway authorities were required by the 30th of June to publish clear information about the condition of their networks and their plans about how they will use this additional funding. Now, I'm pleased to confirm that both Cheshire highway authorities have returned their reports. The Honourable Member's constituents will be able to see that last year in Cheshire East, for example, the council estimated that the number of potholes they filled increased by nearly 50% compared to the year before, and that in Cheshire West and Chester the council is committed to delivering, and the Honourable Member did talk about continuous patching up and the issues with that, and they're delivering 12 major resurfacing schemes during this financial year, including the A559 Chester Road in Norwich, Northwich, and the B153 in Kingsley. Everyone in England should now have access to these reports by logging on to the council's website, and I understand that the Cheshire East Council has an interactive map, I was reliably informed. So the member, I'm sure, as soon as she leaves this chamber, will be heading straight to a computer to take a look at that. But everyone will be able to log on to their local council's website to understand more about what their local highway authority is doing to improve their roads and see firsthand the difference that this government's funding is making. Crucially, this will also help them challenge their local authority if they're not delivering. However, our funding for local roads doesn't stop there. The Honourable Member should be aware already of the results of the spending review, where it was announced that the government will be providing £24 billion of capital funding between 26-27 and 29-30 to maintain and improve motorways and local roads across the country. This funding will allow national highways and local authorities to invest significantly in improving long-term conditions of England's road network, delivering faster, delivering safer and more reliable journeys. We will announce allocations for individual authorities in due course, but the capital funding for highways also included a £1 billion investment to enhance the road network and create a new structures fund that will inject cash into repairing roads and run-down bridges, decaying flyovers and worn-out tunnels across the country. Further funding of over £6 million has been granted for active travel schemes for both Cheshire West and Chester and Cheshire East, for a total of 13 schemes. I'm also delighted that on the 8th of July, the Department confirmed it will provide £48 million of funding towards Cheshire East Council's important Middlewich Eastern Bypass scheme, which is intended to help reduce congestion and safety concerns in the town centre. To conclude, this government is dedicated to supporting local highway authorities to improve and maintain roads for all users, and we will continue to prove our dedication through funding, through transparency and through support for local highway authorities.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Order, order.